Seems like it's the alternative weather again. First it rains, then it snows, now it's raining again. I prefer it if it's snowing. I wonder if it'll all disappear by the next day or so. And what did I read today? I guess it was kind of interesting. Apparently, I guess it says in Hong Kong, there's people who want drones banned. Like here it says, why it's time recreational drones were grounded in Hong Kong. Kind of interesting. It says, is nowhere safe from drones in Hong Kong. It's time to control the flying pests. In Hong Kong's country parks and remote villages, and on beaches, the serenity is often broken by the incessant buzz of drones. From June 2022, drone owners will need to register their craft, pass a competency test, and take out insurance, but will that be enough? And from reading this, it seems like there's actually groups of people that just hate it so much, where they have like an anger management issue, that's the right way to say it. It says the inaugural meeting of DADS, Drones Are Despicable Society, was held well away from prying eyes at an underground location in a little-known part of Kowloon last month. The main agenda was dealt with in a matter of moments, and members then proceeded to the item marked any other business, namely smashing a DJI Air 2S to smithereens with lumps of hammers. Man, is this like a cult or something now? Where if someone sees a drone, must get rid of it. Not quite the sort of behavior to be expected from a group of supposedly full-grown adults who hold down responsible day jobs. Well, you try maintaining your equilibrium after being buzzed by scores of little zingers in parts of Hong Kong that were once a haven of tranquility. High in the country parks down by the beach and slumbering villages in the new territories nowadays, nowhere is safe from that malign eye in the sky. Piloted by some nosy geek who, having mastered the technology of getting his, and this is very much a boy's pastime, new toy, aloft flies it hither and thither. No matter that, its flea in your earbuzz might be infuriating scores of innocents below. There's just so much craziness in this statement here. The first thing would be easy with the stereotypes, I'll get into all this a little later. It says, recreational drones have been disturbing ordinary peaceable people since 2015, when they took off, to coin a phrase, in the United States, where more than 1 million were sold in the space of a year. In December 2018, drones were reportedly sighted near the runway at Gatwick Airport outside London. More than 1,000 flights were cancelled and 140,000 passengers' festive holidays plans were put on hold while the police investigated, although nobody was ever charged. Oh no, the Gatwick situation again. Yeah, nobody was charged and they didn't find a drone either. Never before has one selfish little swine been able to wreak such havoc on the lives of so many others with so little effort. Back at Hong Kong at present, the civil aviation bods do not permit drones or any of their covials, such as quadcopters, weighing more than 7 kilograms. But any Tom, Biggles, or Harry can launch his plaything skyward if it weighs 6.99999 kilograms or less. At least flying at night is banned. Likewise, anywhere near airports or other sensitive areas. Is it an understatement to say these guys really hate drones? It says there's a ray of hope on the horizon. From June, droners will need to register their craft, pass a competency, and they say, test, and take out insurance. DADS has officially decreed this to be the absolute minimum requirement and will be campaigning for the total prohibition of the silliest, most fictitious, pointless, and pernicious invention of recent years as soon as possible. It's really hard to take this seriously in many ways, isn't it? It just feels like there's so much uneducated perceptions in this article, I guess. I guess for one, in terms of how long drones have actually been out there, technically they consider everything like a model aircraft as a quote drone too, so it's been there longer than just 1995 like what this says. And saying that the technology, for example, is one of the most useless or annoying inventions. Have you read all the stories of people using it to save lives and all that? I mean, how ridiculous is this? For example, like lost hikers that use thermal drones to actually find them in an instant. And then the quotes, for example, is saying all operators are, I guess, quote, some nosy geek. How stereotypical and prejudiced can you get with this article here? It reminds me of any other topic in life where certain groups of people are always casted in a negative light. To me, in general, like everything in life, it should just come down to equal rights. If they're not specifically, let's just say, quote, harming somebody, then it should be okay. Because if you're just annoyed with something in general, imagine how many things in the world you'd have to ban because somebody doesn't like it. That's not a good enough reason, in my opinion, to say ban them all, so to speak. And in general, when it comes to the topic of things like drone regulations, people always stereotyping certain groups of people, saying, like here, I guess they're all quote geeks and all that. It reminds me of the saying from the very beginning. To me, when it comes to this stuff, it's not even so much about flying a drone. It's discrimination in general and people having this prejudiced mindset. So I thought this would be interesting because in this case, since it's around Hong Kong, I mean, there's Asians there, correct? Chinese people. So I think this would be a good way to think about it, because I often say this is why it's good to read a diverse amount of topics, because you can kind of see the similarities. So on the topic of things like discrimination, how about things like racism? Now really think about this. For here in Canada, apparently in the past, there was this Chinese head tax. So essentially in the past, apparently if you wanted to immigrate here and you were Chinese, you were specifically taxed for it. This wasn't a universal thing for everyone, it was only Chinese people. Now really think about this, just in terms of how things are managed, I guess, in terms of things like drone regulations, people always stereotyping other people to say get rid of them all and so forth. It says here, the Chinese head tax was enacted to restrict immigration after Chinese labor was no longer needed to build the Canadian Pacific Railway. Between 1885 and 1923, Chinese immigrants had to pay a head tax to enter Canada. The tax was levied under the Chinese Immigration Act 1885. It was the first legislation in Canadian history to exclude immigration on the basis of ethnic background. With few exceptions, Chinese people had to pay at least $50 to come to Canada. The tax was later raised to $100 to then $500. During the 38 years the tax was in effect, around 82,000 Chinese immigrants paid nearly $23 million in tax. The head tax was removed with the passing of the Chinese Immigration Act in 1923, also known as the Chinese Exclusion Act. It banned all Chinese immigrants until its repeal in 1947. In 2006, the federal government apologized for the head tax and its other racist immigration policies targeting Chinese people. Now, think about that in general, how long it took for people to, I guess, repeal this. People paying taxes, fees, just based on their ethnicity. Why? Because people are like, oh, we don't need you anymore. You guys are, quote, stealing our jobs. You all have some kind of disease or something like that. So because of that, it's okay for you to discriminate against these groups of people? Imagine all the people who actually said that. And think of that in terms of people who actually target, let's just say, a drone operator, and they put them in the same bucket in the same way. Apparently there were debates about this in terms of Chinese immigration and them saying, for example, people who are against it, they told them, hey, if you don't have these guys come in, then you can't finish things like the railroad just due to the lack of labor. And it says here, Prime Minister John A. Macdonald acknowledged the necessity of Chinese labor. When the government of British Columbia tried to ban Chinese immigration in 1882, Macdonald said in the House of Commons, either you must have this labor or you can't have the railway. But as construction of the railway neared completion, Macdonald willingly yielded to prejudice and discriminatory politicians, trade unionists, and public opinion. In 1884, he appointed the Royal Commission on Chinese Immigration to investigate the restriction of Chinese immigrants. So they had, I guess, a panel of people, and what happened? Really think about this actually. It says here, Commissioners Sir Joseph Adolphe Chapleau and John Hamilton Gray heard testimonies from 51 witnesses. Most of them gave negative reports. The only testimonials from Chinese people were provided by 2 consular officials from San Francisco, California. Other nations' immigration policies were looked at by the commissions, including the American Chinese Exclusion Act, 1882, and Chinese immigration laws in New Zealand and Victoria, Australia. Both levied a 10-pound poll tax on Chinese immigrants. So it's one of those, hey, look, we did our research, everyone else is charging people fees and so forth, so we should do it too. So what started as $10 apparently ballooned up to $500, and they even say here, I guess, in terms of things, if you consider inflation, it says the fee was equal to about 2 years' salary or the purchase of 2 homes. And why did they need this fee? It says money raised by such taxation was to be spent on a health inspector to examine all Chinese passengers for diseases. The tax would also pay for a joint tribunal. It would closely monitor and control the lives of Chinese people in Canada. Okay, nowadays when you hear this, you'll think it's ridiculous and all that. But what is the difference fundamentally in terms of a mindset where people who promote things, let's just say like over-the-top drone regulations and all that, yes, tax them this and that, these guys are all dangerous and so forth. What is the fundamental difference in terms of the mindset? And it says McDonald willingly yielded to prejudice and discriminatory politicians, trade unionists, and public opinion. It's kind of the same thing if you think about it in terms of, again, like here, because a lot of the influence deals with things like commercial operations. There's virtually no representation from what I've seen from people who purely fly things like, just say, recreationally, and yet you have people with these weird perceptions that they're all being spied on and so forth, and you encourage, yes, more fees, more registration, more restrictions. How's it different in that sense? That's why when I read stories, for example, such as how Transport Canada employees were investigated for spreading racist emails, I mean, aside from the fact that it was so long ago and they only recently dealt with it, probably just because there's more international exposure for the subject matter, what makes me concerned is how you have people in a position of power, if they're willing to discriminate against a group of people in this avenue, what's stopping them from doing it to other groups of people? And I would say that's kind of what they're doing to people like recreational flyers, for example. Constantly calling all of them like, oh, you guys are dangerous, don't do this, don't do that. Or at the same time, in terms of representation, it's almost the same thing. There's virtually no representation for those groups of people. It's always, no, we spoke to some people, I guess like what, commercial operators and so forth, people selling courses. We agree, charge them fees and all that. I mean, is there anyone that wants to challenge my perception in terms of seeing the correlation like here, where people who are fundamentally discriminating, they do it in other avenues as well, which is, in my opinion, the scary part. And you can argue here, hey, it's like a driver's license. No, it's not like a driver's license. That's not how a road or cars work in general. Tons of people or different, quote, vehicles share a road all the time. Bicycles, for example, pedestrians crossing the road, so it's not anything like that. That's what I think is kind of, I guess, disappointing in many ways, where if you are, I guess you could say, like a visible minority and you're against stuff like that in the past, yet here you're discriminating against a group of people in the exact same manner, you're kind of a hypocrite. Where it's not that you're against things like prejudice and discrimination, you're more just against things that go against whatever it is that affects your lifestyle. I mean, I could use any other example. I mean, if you're like a female, in the past they said apparently they couldn't vote, correct? Yet you have people fighting for it, and now they can vote. So if you are like there, like a female nowadays where you have the freedom to vote, yet you're going out there again saying, oh no, restrict all these guys, they don't deserve to do this and that, they're all dangerous. What's the difference in terms of your mindset there? That means you're not really against discrimination or prejudice in general, you're just for your own rights, so to speak, and that's not right. So if you are someone who promotes over-the-top regulations while constantly categorizing everyone as like dangerous, like in that sense and so forth, then in my opinion, you are, so to speak, a prejudiced individual. It doesn't matter what the topic is. If you want to change it to race, then I would say if it was about race, then you would be like a racist. It's the same type of mindset. Try to imagine that scenario too, where if back then you were those people who were against things like that head tax because you said it was racist. Imagine all those companies that say, oh, we don't, quote, make up the rules or whatever, we're just selling you courses or this and that to help you get through the situation. We'll process you, we're glad to. Just pay us a few $100 and all that. Like for those people, wouldn't you be in the same mindset saying, what in the world, you're profiting off this? Shouldn't you be there telling them to get rid of this because it's discriminating? I see it the same way, where there's people saying, oh yeah, we encourage this or that, or hey, we don't make it up, but we're happy to sell you this and that, and you're not doing anything to try to change it. I guess that's one advantage to having a diverse background, because like with these stereotypes, I said before, I sure know how to pick my hobbies. If you play video games, most people will say, oh, you're a bunch of geeks, you're unathletic and all that. And to that I can say, okay, let's go for a hike, bud. Comes along with me. what is this? How do you do this? Or vice versa. It could be things, for example, oh, a person like you're just like, quote, violent gangsters and martial artists. You have no feelings or anything like that. I show them things artistically, for example. Hey, what is this? Like, you know, animals coming up to me and all that. So fortunately, I can break a lot of those stereotypes and all that just based on my past, I guess, experiences in life. And I think more people need to do that in terms of being open-minded and researching about other topics and cultures, because in many ways, it just comes across as so many people are ignorant about various things. Okay, I flew only really quickly because it only stopped raining at certain times. Alright, see you guys later.